The bells of Blackmere tolled long after sunset, their hollow cries rolling through the fog like warnings from the dead. Lady Evelyn Ashborne stood upon the balcony of her father's keep, gloved fingers curled around the handle of her golden whip. Below her, the city burned with torchlight and misery. Starving peasants drifted through the muddy streets, while nobles feasted behind stained glass windows. A cold wind stirred her crimson cloak. "Your father wishes to see you, my lady," a servant whispered. Evelyn did not turn. Flames danced softly between her fingertips, alive as breathing things. "I know." The servant fled quickly. Most feared her. The Duke of Ashborne had raised his daughter to become a weapon. Fire magic flowed through the Ashborne bloodline, ancient and violent, but Evelyn wielded it better than any living mage. Men whispered she could melt armor from flesh. Others claimed she once turned an entire battlefield to ash. None of them knew how tired she truly was. That night, she escaped the castle disguised beneath a dark hood and wandered into the lower district, where soot coated the air and sparks rose endlessly from blacksmith forges. That was where she first saw him. The blacksmith's son stood bare-armed beside the furnace, hammer crashing against glowing steel. Sweat gleamed along the sharp lines of his neck. Dark hair fell into storm-gray eyes that carried neither fear nor reverence when they met hers, only curiosity. "You're staring," he said. Evelyn blinked, startled anyone dared speak to her so plainly. "And you're insolent." A crooked smile touched his lips. "Comes with the trade." She should have left then. Noble daughters did not linger in forge houses. Fire mages did not speak to commoners. Yet something rooted her there. "What is your name?" she asked. "Rowan." The forge flames reflected in his eyes, and for the first time in years, Evelyn felt warm in a way that had nothing to do with magic. Days turned into weeks. She returned again and again beneath the veil of night, each visit peeling away another layer of the iron cage around her heart. Rowan spoke to her like she was human, not a legend drenched in blood and expectation. He taught her how horseshoes were shaped. She taught him how fire listened to emotion. Sometimes she laughed, real laughter, the kind she thought had died in childhood. But darkness always finds fragile things. One evening, Rowan discovered the truth as soldiers flooded the forge district searching for the Duke's missing daughter. "You're Evelyn Ashborne," he whispered. Fear flickered across his face. Not fear of her power, but fear of what loving her meant. "I never meant to lie to you." "You didn't have to." The captain stepped forward. "My lady, the Duke commands your return." Evelyn's jaw tightened. Behind her, Rowan was already reaching for a hammer, though he stood no chance against armored knights. The captain smirked. "Careful, blacksmith. Nobles don't marry filth." Something ancient and furious awakened inside Evelyn. Fire erupted from her body in a violent golden blaze. Her whip cracked through the air like thunder. One strike. A wall of flame swallowed the soldiers whole. The street exploded into chaos as burning embers rained from the sky. Rowan stared at her through the inferno, not horrified, awestruck. Evelyn stepped toward him, fire curling around her like living wings. "They will hunt us now," she said softly. Rowan took her soot-stained hand without hesitation. "Then let them hunt." The fires raged long into the night. Ash drifted through the streets of Blackmere like falling snow, while the Duke's soldiers screamed beneath collapsing rooftops. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang in frantic desperation. Evelyn and Rowan fled through narrow alleyways lit only by flame. Her golden whip dragged sparks across the cobblestones as she ran, the heat of her magic still radiating from her skin. Every breath felt sharp and unstable. She had never unleashed that much power before, not in the city, not against her father's men. Rowan caught her wrist beneath the shadow of an abandoned chapel. "Evelyn," she turned, eyes glowing faintly amber in the darkness. "We have to keep moving," she said. But Rowan did not let go. For a moment, the chaos around them faded beneath the rain. "You're shaking." The realization startled her more than the blood on her hands. She was, not from fear of the soldiers, not from the flames, but from what came next. "The Duke will never stop hunting us," she whispered. "I burned his men alive. You protected me." "No." Her voice cracked softly. "I doomed you." Thunder rolled across the sky. Rowan stepped closer, close enough for the warmth of the forge still lingering on his skin to cut through the cold rain. Soot stained his face, and yet to Evelyn he looked more beautiful than any noble lord she had ever known. "You spent your whole life being their weapon," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time you became something else." Evelyn stared at him, stunned by the gentleness in his voice. No one had ever spoken to her like she could be saved. A distant horn echoed through the city gates, city bells ringing, more soldiers. She closed her eyes briefly before raising her hand. Fire spiraled between her fingers, illuminating the ruined street in gold and crimson light. "There's an old mountain pass beyond the northern woods," Rowan said. "If we reach it before dawn, we disappear." Disappear. The word felt impossible, yet when Evelyn looked at him, standing beside her beneath the burning sky, she wanted to believe it. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like a prison. It felt dangerous, wild, free. And together, beneath the storm and ash, the Duke's daughter and the blacksmith's son vanished into the night. The village of Grey Hollow slept beneath a curtain of rain. Water dripped from crooked rooftops and gathered in shallow puddles along the muddy road, reflecting the warm gold of lantern light. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang once, hollow and lonely against the storm. Evelyn Ashborne stood beneath the awning of the old inn, her hood drawn low over her crimson hair. The wind carried the scent of wet pine and smoke from nearby chimneys, but none of it could wash away the feeling that Blackmere still lingered behind her like a shadow. Rowan emerged from the stable carrying 2 steaming cups in rough clay mugs. "You disappeared again," he said softly. Evelyn glanced at him. "I was only outside." "You look like someone waiting for soldiers." A faint smile touched her lips, though sadness dulled it quickly. "Maybe I still am." Rowan handed her one of the cups. The warmth seeped into her cold fingers immediately. "Mulled cider," he said. The innkeeper insisted. Evelyn took a careful sip. Cinnamon and apple filled her mouth, gentle and comforting. It reminded her painfully of winters before everything had fallen apart, before her father became a monster in noble silk. "They're kind here," she murmured. "They don't know who you are." "That's why." The rain intensified, rattling against the wooden beams overhead. Rowan leaned beside her, his shoulder brushing hers for only a second before pulling away again, as though he still feared crossing some invisible line between them. Evelyn noticed. "You don't have to keep your distance from me," she whispered. Rowan stared out at the village road. "I was your family's blacksmith's son. And now? Now I'm a fugitive traveling beside a duke's daughter with a price on her head." A weak laugh escaped her. "When you say it aloud, it sounds absurd. It sounds dangerous." Silence settled between them, filled only by rain and the distant murmur of voices inside the inn. Evelyn lowered her gaze to the muddy street. "Do you regret coming with me?" The question lingered heavily. Rowan answered without hesitation. "Never." She looked up at him then, truly looked at him. His dark hair was damp from the rain, strands falling across tired eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. His hands were rough from years at the forge, scarred and strong, yet they held every fragile thing as though it mattered. No nobleman had ever looked at her the way Rowan did, not as a possession, not as a bargaining piece, just Evelyn. "I keep thinking," she said quietly, "that one day you'll wake up and realize your life was easier before me." Rowan turned toward her fully now. "Before you, my life was smaller." Her breath caught. The storm seemed to fade around them. For a moment, neither moved. Then Rowan slowly reached for her hand. His fingers were warm despite the cold night. Evelyn felt something inside her ache at the tenderness of it. After so much death, betrayal, and fear, kindness felt almost unbearable. She stepped closer before she could stop herself, resting her forehead lightly against his shoulder. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. Rowan's hand tightened gently around hers. "Then we'll figure it out together." Across Grey Hollow, the lanterns continued to glow against the rain. Fragile little lights refusing to surrender to the dark. The forest was silent except for the sound of Rowan running. Branches clawed at his cloak as he pushed through the darkness, boots slipping against wet earth. His lungs burned from exhaustion, every breath sharp with cold night air. Behind him came the distant thunder of horses. They were gaining. "Rowan," a voice shouted through the trees. Not Evelyn. A mercenary. He gritted his teeth and kept moving, clutching the satchel against his chest. Inside were forged border papers, their only chance of escaping Blackmere for good. A crossbow bolt struck a tree beside his head. Rowan stumbled hard, crashing into the mud. Pain exploded through his shoulder. Before he could rise, rough hands seized him violently, dragging him backward across the forest floor. "There he is," one of the riders barked. Torchlight flooded the darkness. 5 mercenaries surrounded him in black leather armor, marked with the silver wolf crest of House Ashborne. Rowan struggled, but a boot slammed into his ribs, forcing the breath from his lungs. "Easy now, blacksmith," the leader sneered, crouching beside him. A scar twisted across the man's mouth like a second grin. "The Duke wants you alive." Rowan spat blood into the dirt. "Then he'll be disappointed." The mercenary laughed softly. "You really think this is about you?" At those words, Rowan froze. Fear gripped him colder than the rain. "Where is Evelyn?" the man asked. Rowan said nothing. A fist struck his face hard enough to send stars across his vision. "Where is she?" Still he stayed silent. The leader rose slowly, drawing a dagger that gleamed silver in the torchlight. "You should have stayed at your forge, boy," he said quietly. "Would have saved you both a great deal of suffering." The mercenaries hauled Rowan to his feet, and chained his hands behind his back. And somewhere beyond the trees, thunder rolled across Blackmere like a warning. Rain fell in cold sheets across the courtyard of Blackmere Keep. Evelyn stood hidden among the crowd beneath a dark cloak, trembling fingers pressed against her mouth as soldiers forced Rowan onto the execution platform. Chains bound his wrists, blood stained the collar of his torn shirt. But even beaten and bruised, he searched the crowd as though hoping to find her. The sight nearly broke her. By order of Duke Ashborne, the herald announced, his voice echoing against the stone walls, Rowan Vey, traitor and conspirator against the crown, is sentenced to death. The crowd murmured uneasily. Evelyn could barely breathe. This was her fault. Every bruise on Rowan's face, every chain around his wrists, every terrified moment that had led him here. Her father sat above the courtyard beneath a crimson canopy, expression cold and unreadable. To him, Rowan was nothing more than an example, a warning. The executioner stepped forward, unsheathing a massive steel blade. Rowan finally stopped searching the crowd. Instead, he lifted his head toward the storm-dark sky and smiled faintly, not in fear, not in surrender, as though he had already accepted whatever came next. Tears blurred Evelyn's vision. "Rowan," she whispered helplessly. Then suddenly, his eyes found hers, even hidden beneath the cloak. Somehow he recognized her instantly. The world seemed to vanish around them. The rain, the soldiers, the crowd, all of it faded beneath the unbearable sadness in his expression. And yet, he still smiled. A small, gentle smile meant only for her, as if trying to comfort her one last time. Evelyn felt her knees weaken. The executioner raised the blade high. "No," she choked. Thunder cracked across the sky. The blade came down, and Evelyn's scream disappeared beneath the storm. Blackmere Keep burned like a funeral pyre against the night sky. Flames crawled up the ancient stone towers, spilling from shattered windows in waves of crimson and gold. Smoke rolled across the heavens while bells rang wildly through the chaos below. Evelyn Ashborne stood in the middle of the throne hall, breathing hard, a burning torch clenched in her trembling hand. The banners of House Ashborne collapsed one by one into the fire. Her father's kingdom was dying, and she had killed it. Behind her, nobles and servants fled screaming through the corridors as the heat became unbearable. Sparks drifted through the air like dying stars, settling against Evelyn's dark cloak. She barely noticed. All she could see was Rowan, his smile beneath the rain, the sound of the blade, the silence afterward. A broken sound escaped her throat, somewhere between grief and rage. "You took everything from me," she whispered. The flames answered with a roar. At the far end of the hall, Duke Ashborne emerged through the smoke surrounded by guards, fury twisting his face. "You foolish girl," he shouted. "Do you understand what you've done?" Evelyn turned slowly toward him. For the first time in her life, she felt no fear. "You executed the only person who ever loved me." The Duke's expression hardened. He was nothing. "No," Evelyn said softly, tears cutting through the soot on her face. "He was everything." A burning beam crashed from the ceiling between them, scattering sparks across the throne room. The guards recoiled. Evelyn did not move. She stared at the kingdom that had stolen her happiness and condemned her to silence for so many years. Then she threw the torch onto the crimson throne itself. Fire erupted instantly. The seat of House Ashborne vanished beneath flames, and with tears in her eyes, Evelyn turned her back on Blackmere forever as the castle collapsed behind her.